What's going on, everybody? I'm Brian Bogert, and I am here with my beautiful better half.
Ashley Bogert.
And the reason she's joining me today is because I've been getting a lot of questions recently about people who are saying, I have a happy marriage, and my time, energy, and focus is at home. But I really want to chase my dreams, and I'm afraid that it's going to sacrifice things at home. And what does that look like? And how do you navigate that? And so I figured instead of me just getting on here and freestyling an answer, who better to talk to than my wife, who's my partner in life, and figure out how we manage this together? Because it's not what I do, it's what we do mutually that makes the difference. So, Ashley, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear that question?
Well, I think that quality over quantity sometimes is the most important thing, at least in our marriage. I think before making any big choices about life plans and career paths, it's really important to sit down and think about what does the time we spend together actually look like? Are we just absent-mindedly spending time together, scrolling through our phones, not really making that time count? Or are we making every interaction meaningful? Are we putting our hearts and souls into it as much as we possibly can? Because honestly, I'm guilty of it myself. I think there's a lot of dead time in a marriage, which sounds kind of terrible to say out loud, but you get comfortable and you stop being intentional. And I think that when either partner is setting out on a new adventure, it's super, super important that you come together and you look at what your mutual goals are, your individual goals, and then figure out how do we make this work together and how do we put intentional time forth and energy when we are together. So, I've noticed a huge difference with you since you've started Brian Bogert Companies full time. And you're so intentional about the time you spend with me and with the kids. And it's up and down, right? Nobody's perfect. And there's times that we have to touch base and kind of recalibrate. But, when you're with us, you're with us. The kids feel it. You have more patience. You're more intentional about your responses. You're there. You're showing up for me. You're asking how you can help. And while you did those things prior to this, it feels different now. I think I get the feeling from you that you are really like focusing your energy. So even though there are times when maybe we see you less or it feels like you're not around quite as much in the actual number of minutes per day or week, the time you are with us, I'm left with that like feeling of togetherness and family that honestly we were lacking sometimes before.
Yeah. And, I think a lot of the reasons that people have asked me this question is not just because of what I do professionally and how I help people become who they are and get to their next level. But, many of you who've been following my journey know that May 31st of this year, we executed a buy sell in another business that we were a part of and decided to go full time into this focus. And there was a 10-month transition period before that we went into knowing how difficult this was going to be and knowing that it meant I was going to be spending more time because I was trying to exit one business at the top level of standard that I would set for myself, as well as build the foundation for where we were going to be able to go over the next 25 years to impact 1 billion lives. And so it wasn't like I left and all of a sudden a switch went off and all that time just came back into our world. It got reallocated. Not all towards the business, not all towards my dream, not all towards the goal. But before we did this, Ashley was the big one that gave me the push and the permission to go down this path. And so to make sure that we've been constantly aligning ourselves, we have to have regular check-ins. And just because we are focused on a dream or focused on a goal, that doesn't necessarily mean that all dreams or goals fit right now. I'm not going to go into too much detail about this. I'm going to be making an announcement here relatively soon. But, just this last weekend, we had some variables enter into our life that changed really what we were looking at as it related to her time, my time, burdens, making sure that we can all both be the best versions of each other. And what that change was we found out our kids are not going back to in-person learning. And for those of you, again, who've been following, know that we've got 2 special needs kids. We've got a son with autism, and we have a daughter that's hearing impaired. And virtual learning for those 2 children is
awful,
you described
terrible.
I mean, you know, we didn't sign up to be teachers, but clearly we teach and educate and guide our kids along the whole way. Well, truthfully, we find this out 3-4 nights ago, and you've all heard about a number of commitments that I've made externally, and it hit hard. It hit us really hard. It hit Ashley the hardest.
Let's just say I may have had a mini nervous breakdown.
Yes. But again, that came back to the fact that I needed to be where my feet were, and I needed to focus on my wife and my partner, who has supported me in an unrelenting fashion our entire lives, frankly, to be able to go chase what I want to do and what we want to build together. And that was one of those moments that I had to really pay attention to what was happening, how she was processing it, how it was impacting her. And it just made me realize not everything fits right now. I've made some commitments. I've made some goals. I've made even some external commitments to things that I said I was going to do in the next 4 to 6 months. And they're going to happen. They're just not going to happen in the next 4 to 6 months because they don't fit with where the world is at right now. And they didn't move the needle significantly along the goals that we mutually have together and where we want to take this dream, this business. I would guess I'd ask you, what has been the most difficult thing for us during this period of time?
Well, I can speak for myself, and I think that being vulnerable to the point that is necessary for me has been extremely difficult. I'm someone who's used to being like the strong one who gives strength to others and supports and carries people through. And I'm really good at kind of like shoving my own needs under, so much so that sometimes I don't even realize that I'm doing it. And it's really easy for me to say to myself, it's okay, you know, it's just temporary. It's not going to feel like this all the time. It's not worth ruffling feathers. You know, we don't need to talk about it right now. And then I realize that those feelings that I keep shoving down are beginning to color our interactions, you know, our interactions in our marriage, my interactions with the kids, and it starts building and it kind of becomes this cloud. So I really have to focus on forcing myself to over communicate, and I am not good at it. So what tends to happen is that this cloud builds and then it bursts and the storm comes. The storm of crazy is what I like to call it.
It can be a little scary sometimes.
But I would tell you that at least, number one, I'm recognizing it. I see that this is a pattern, and I know that I'm the only one who can fix it. And I would say to any spouse who's looking to be supportive through a new endeavor or just life in general, you have to be willing to be vulnerable and put yourself out there. And I think what I have discovered is Brian is a lot stronger than I give him credit for. So sometimes I'm worried that something I feel is going to be hurtful to him and could potentially, you know, damage our relationship or just be such an uncomfortable period of communication that I don't want to deal with it. And he continuously surprises me and shows up for those difficult discussions, is present, and like receives what I'm saying without judgment. And I think having faith in your spouse along with being vulnerable yourself, those two things are key.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing, like, if you start by asking the question that I have a great marriage, I've got a happy connection, I've got a good relationship at home, and I'm afraid to chase my goals because I don't want to sacrifice that, I just personally think that's the wrong thought process. Because if you listen to anything that we talk about, it's really about understanding and having clarity on who you are, what are the things that you want to accomplish in this world, and what are the things that are most important. And without a shadow of a doubt, my marriage and my kids are most important. Like, there's no hesitation. And when we decided to go into this, that was the conversation that we had, was none of this will be worth it unless she's by my side, unless my kids are along for the journey with me. None of it, right? Impacting a billion lives, as much as I feel drawn to do that, as much as I feel drawn to the work that I'm in and so connected to, literally none of it's worth it. And I can say that. But if she doesn't always feel that, that doesn't matter. And that's where I get faulty, is I think that I can easily brush over it through the lens of like, well, we've talked about this. We've talked about this 10 times. Like, I've demonstrated to you in the past, or I've done these 10 things, and I'll catalog in my head all the things that I know I've done to demonstrate that to her. But if it doesn't connect, or she doesn't feel it, or she doesn't receive it, again, none of that matters. And so, sometimes when I'm super laser focused in something, I can literally have blinders on. And when I say be where my feet are, I mean, I'm here when I'm in this studio, or when I'm working in my office, or when I'm working with clients. And when I'm with my family, I'm with them. But that doesn't necessarily mean the blinders come all the way off where I see every single thing. And when I'm in a position where I'm reading people all day long, looking at dynamics, making connections, and doing these things, my intuitive side starts to shut off when I'm at home. So despite the fact that I can read her like a book when I'm in the moment, I'm not always in the moment. And so I might know something is off, but I can't put my finger on it. So the combination of our two defaults really doesn't mix well together. And it causes a lot of energy and a lot of, frankly, friction and frustration and hurt feelings that most of the time are unnecessary on both sides. And so that's something we're really working on an active and regular basis. Like right now, is her just telling me what she's thinking so I don't have to guess. And for me to be more intentional even with some of the check-ins and questions. And although I do that, if they aren't the right questions at the right time with the right feeling, it almost doesn't matter. And so it's about getting clear on who you are and where you want to go. It's about putting a level of hierarchy into the level of importance in things and really understanding what those things look like and where they are. And some of the stuff that I'm going to back away from, they're at the bottom of that list in terms of the hierarchy. Like, there was zero hesitation because they're a significant amount of time, but they don't necessarily move the needle from an impact perspective. And they certainly impact us negatively. So there's zero hesitation because the hierarchy becomes true. So when I talk about building a life of alignment that becomes self-regulating, you need a partner that's on the journey with you, that can communicate with you, that can be vulnerable with you, support you, be there to pick you up when you need it, kick you in the butt when you need it, and then be along for the journey, because none of this is worthwhile unless she's by my side. So if you're asking the question, I have a happy marriage, how do I chase my goals and not sacrifice that? You're already in the right path, because what it tells me is that your priorities in the place that you see very clearly. And if you both go into it as partners with that understanding, there's always a way. Like, I refuse to accept that there's not a solution to almost any obstacle on this planet. And that sometimes frustrates her, like, truthfully. But like, I refuse to accept that there's not a way to work through something if it's important enough to us. And I'm going to pause real quick on that. Like, give your 2 cents on that piece, because I know that that's caused friction for us as well.
I think that I like to call myself a realist, and Brian tends to think that I'm a pessimist. But I think that what I need to do more is recognize all the ways that we complement each other, because I think that it's really beautiful. I think that when I take the time and I see, it's easy to kind of like laugh. And I mean, you would not believe all the ways that we're opposite. I mean,
pretty much every way.
Pretty much every single way. But our strengths just complement each other. And I think that it's a mindset in marriage. Sometimes we talk about how we both entered marriage with the belief that being married is a choice, and that it was something that we were going to choose every day that we wake up for the rest of our lives, regardless of whether or not we're feeling passion that day, or anger, or frustration, or happiness, or contentment. Whatever the feelings may be, it's a choice. And it's not a fairy tale. I hate to break it to our 5-year-old daughter, because she thinks that has to be. But when it's a choice and you're able to say, okay, I'm going to choose to see the positive today, I can see all the ways that Brian is putting our family first. And when I start feeling like maybe I don't feel that in my heart and soul, it's usually because there's a lot of other things going on in our life. And sometimes the noise can drown out the importance of the relationship between, two people. And I am always telling our kids, like, your actions speak louder than your words. So if you say you're going to do something and you promise you're going to do it, that's great. It feels good. Words feel good. That's a lot of people's love language is words of affirmation and love. But for me, words can be empty sometimes, and I really need action to show me. So I have to say that this period of time and growth and kind of like recalibration for Brian and I, even though it felt really yucky going into it, it feels really good coming out of it, because I feel like this renewed sense of partnership and love and dedication, because Brian put his money where his mouth is, and he's not just saying that he's putting our family first. He kind of just was like, listen, I think this is going to help show you how I feel, and he did it. No hesitation.
Yeah. But I think action speaking louder than words is a real thing that I think we need to pay attention to on a day in and day out basis. I mean, and this is an area that we can keep each other accountable on things as well. I mean, I have had a lot going on recently. We have had a lot going on recently. And, I was home more and present more over the last few days through the holidays than I have been for the last 6 months. And I know that the kids have continually been making comments about wanting more time with daddy and spending more time with daddy. And, my present time every single evening and trying to get those moments throughout the day is meaningful. But I know for a fact that it's not enough, and it doesn't give them what they need at a deep level. And all week, I've been telling my son that I was going to take him mountain biking, and I asked my daughter if she'd go on a date with me a week ago, and it lit her little heart up. And, they've been asking me almost every day, like, Dad, are we doing it today? Dad, are we doing it today? Dad, are we doing it today? And I try really, really hard to not say no when my kids ask me something real time. I mean, if my son asks me to play football, I really try to say yes, even if it's only for 2 minutes. But I don't always. And I can be consumed, and I can be overwhelmed, and I can have all these things. And, that's been eating at me too, because I also care very deeply about my do-say ratio. Like, if I say I'm going to do something and I don't do it, I shame myself for it, frankly. I feel guilty. I shame myself. I beat myself up. And, we've got this annual tradition for 11 years since I proposed to her that we watch The Hangover every year on Christmas Eve, because we did it the night that we got engaged, and we haven't done it. We didn't do it this year. Life took over. And so last night we were watching the movie. Maybe it was 2 nights ago. I don't remember. And we were getting into it. And as we were watching it, I just it was bringing up a bunch of emotions for me, which was interesting, because those of you who know me know I've only felt emotions for a few years. I certainly didn't 11 years ago. And when I was telling her about all this stuff, it was eating at me. And she said, all right, I want to spend time with you, but the kids' time is really important. And you need to make this a priority. So how do we make it happen? And I was having a mental block. I literally was. I was on a mental block, because it had gone so many days with me avoiding it. It was developing into suffering. And I needed to just rip the Band-Aid off and embrace the pain to avoid the suffering of the shame and guilt that I was going to carry if I didn't follow through with my kids this week. Because I never want my kids to question, if I tell them I'm going to do something, that I'm going to do it. And thus far, I feel like I've always followed through. And this was an area that was eating at me. So she took the control, and she's like, we're just going to make this happen. You're going to take Blake tomorrow morning. I'm going to get up. I'm going to make pancakes. We're going to get everything ready. I'll get him ready. You get the bike stuff ready. Take him mountain biking. We had a little time scheduled for ourselves. We were able to get that time for about 90 minutes in the middle of the day. And then we were able to pick up flowers on the way home, so I could come home and surprise my daughter, because she wasn't expecting a date. And then we just went out and had some really special time. So, that filled my heart on a super deep level. I know that it made my kids' days. I know that it, at the time that we had was meaningful. But despite everything that we just talked about, I just want you all to know, this isn't easy. It's really hard. But as you've also heard me talk about, I think that the most meaningful things in life don't come easy. And if it wasn't for my partner to challenge me and push me and show me all of her in a way that I need to see it so I can make the best decisions as it relates to my own hierarchy of priorities and our mutual ones, we won't succeed. And so I've often said here recently as well, like what you see externally is only 50% me. And that's why this was the most fitting video for her to join me on, because the other 50% is her. The observations, my understanding of human behavior, my ability to articulate it, my ability to see patterns, the way I can communicate it into the world, 50% is me. The other 50% is her. Like, we are partners, and together, we're, I think, greater than 100%. That's just what you end up seeing externally. So I am just hoping that you all get value out of this conversation, and we've had some other people express interest in us doing some joint stuff together. So if you do see value, please light us up with likes, comments, and shares, and let us know confirmation. Do you want to see the other 50% on camera? Because she hates the camera, but she's doing this because we've been getting a lot of feedback that people want her to be involved in this holistic conversation that we're having. Do you have any other thoughts to add before we wrap up, babe?
So many thoughts, so little time. We'll have to do another episode.
Is there a closing thought you want to give?
I think don't ever undervalue yourself in a relationship.
Yes.
You're just as important as your spouse, and if you don't see yourself as an equal, nobody else will. So keep that in mind.
Perfect closing thought. I couldn't have said it any better. And in fact, I'm just going to wrap up, and we'll probably tag team this one. So I'm going to say until next time, be great and
be you.
Alrighty. See ya.